Dave. Think about that. Work it in. So I'm going to make a confession right now. I don't usually get very nervous coming up here anymore. I am today though. So I need a favor from you. If there's this thing, sometimes you'll hear people sitting next to you. It happens every once in a while. Somebody will shout out "Amen" in the middle of a message, and if you've never heard that before, "Amen" just means truly. Amen. And so what it is you saying that something that you just heard is true. Something that you just heard connected with you. You agree with it. Something like that. And so if you hear something that I say today that touches you or connects with you, or you feel it is true, feel free to shout out "Amen," because I could use the encouragement. I really could. So here's a sentence for you. Sometimes you just want something to hold on to. Think about that for a second. Is that true for you? Yes. It's true for me, especially when things get rough. I think it's part of the human experience. My background is in psychology. One of the earliest lessons that I learned was the power of contact comfort. There is power in touch. We seek out something to hold on to when we're stressed or afraid or desperate, because there's something in the act of holding and being held that gives strength and courage and peace, especially when you have the right thing to hold on to. But sometimes, in the absence of the right thing, anything will do. I remember once when I was probably about 4 years old. I was with my mom, right there. I was with my mom. I was at Fox Valley Mall, and I got lost.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's easy to do that, right? You know, he's a little person, all these big, tall racks of clothes, and I was an anxious child. I probably just lost contact with my mom for just a couple of moments, and I was like, oh no, I've been lost. I was British as a child. I immediately panicked. I was like, what am I going to eat in this dark forest with men's clothes and socks? And so I did what was reasonable. I took off my hat and I covered my face with it and I wept into it. My little winter hat with the stupid ball at the end of it. Does that serve any purpose?
No.
The ball at the end? It doesn't. But it was there, and it just bounced as I walked through the men's department of JCPenney, weeping. And then I bumped into somebody. So I peeked out, and I saw my mother's hand waiting there for me. And I grabbed onto it, and I held it, and I looked up, and it was not my mother. It was not my mother. And I was like, I didn't let go of that hand. Because sometimes you just want something to hold on to. Thank you. I was ready to grab any hand that was going to get me through that moment. And life can get like that. I had a string of experiences, even seasons of my life that I just wanted to get through. That's why I like the idea of the series that we're doing right now, because I think that just trying to get through the current crisis is something that we can all relate to. But how we do that, how we make it through, that can make all the difference in the world. And so last week we talked about 3 stages of faith that a Christ follower goes through. And the first stage on that is something called confident faith. You have this when you first find your way back to God. It's falling in love. The world suddenly looks different. It feels great. Faith at this point it's pretty simple. We feel connected and motivated in prayer. Obedience is difficult, but it bears fruit. And it leads to joy. But inevitably, something shakes you. It tests our limits. We enter a stage at that point called challenged faith. We lose something, someone, we get let down, we get hurt, or we just start feeling disconnected. And all of a sudden, all the pat answers to life's big questions, they don't come so easy. And prayer feels dry, and God feels distant. Trusting Him becomes difficult. Faith becomes a struggle. So what do we do with that? The hope is that we move through it into something called a living faith. Something that's survived the fire. It's not pretty, it's not shiny, but it's authentic and it's tested. And I think that most of us want that kind of faith. But the only way to grow it is to go through the fire. The only way to do it is to go through that challenged faith stage. And so last week, John Ferguson was here, and he talked about how this cycle, we just go through it continuously. So where are you at in it today? There should have been a piece of paper on your seat when you came in. If you're going through something that's challenging your faith, take a moment right now and just write it down. If you were here last week, we asked you to do the same thing. You can write the same thing that you wrote last week. But just take a moment, write something. You're the only one who's going to read it. So just write down a word, just jot down something. It only needs to make sense to you. And if you aren't going through something, then you and I, we can just sit in awkward silence for like 20 seconds. Okay? So go ahead and write, and I'll count silently.